But first off, and for the first half an hour and thereafter, delighted to welcome to the show a man who had an incredibly successful career as a jockey. Indeed, he broke a record straight out of the blocks when still a teenager. 91 winners as a conditional jockey. Became one of the first established stable jockeys to Paul Nicholls, for whom he rode multiple Grade 1 winners, including his first Cheltenham Festival winner, and now has embarked on an even more stellar career as part of the all-conquering Tizzard training team. He is, of course, Joe Tizard. Good morning.
Hi, Nick.
And fresh from Ascot yesterday, an unusually quiet Saturday for you.
Yeah, it was 4 runners yesterday, just the one at Ascot, so it's an easy day for me, really. Dad was down at Taunton.
But if you'd said 15 years ago, oh, just a quiet Saturday for the Colin Tizzard team with only 4 runners, 3 of them at Ascot, people would have said, what? You know, and if you'd said the Tizzards joined the roster of Cheveley Park trainers, people might have been equally surprised. It's amazing how it's snowballed.
Yeah, it is. It's at home we haven't really noticed it. You know, it just gradually got bigger and bigger, and then it's only when you sort of like sit back now and you look and think, blimey, that's I can't remember how it used to be, to be honest. You know, there was back when there was sort of 20 horses in. Felt busy then. It's even more so now.
And when you talk to you and your father, it seems as though it's just grown organically and grown organically. Was there ever a big plan, a grand plan, to turn it into the sort of juggernaut that it is now?
Not necessarily a grand plan, but Dad always liked the idea of training horses. You know, even when we were point-to-pointing, Dad enjoyed doing that. We were dairy farmers, but Dad enjoyed having horses about and you know, thinking that it was a trainer, certainly. And then the sort of like the first big step for us was when I turned professional. Dad did 1 season with point-to-pointers, trying to find jockeys that he didn't know. He was doing it for me as his son to ride for him as a family thing, and he didn't have a lot of fun in that, so got a permit out, and then horses that we were beating in point-to-point fields or were beating ours, they were like, well, if he can win under rules and have a bit more, mine could win under rules. And then the permit turned into a full licence, and then it just gradually stepped up.
Because, of course, in the early days, I suppose, of your dad's career with a licence, you were otherwise engaged, and you were otherwise engaged on one of the most important jobs in the sport. When you look back on your early career as a jockey now, how do you look back on it?
Well, I'm very proud of it, but like the first season, we're talking about when I was champion conditional, I was kind of oblivious to what was going on, and to be perfectly honest. I'd gone into this role from a 16-year-old that I went to Paul Nicholls when I was 16 years old, used to go there on my moped, and then amateur, turned professional. I remember driving back from Fontwell and Paul was saying, I think you should turn professional. I went home to Mum and Dad and was like, Paul wants me to turn professional. That was like a huge step, but then I turned professional. Within the first month, I had 7 winners. Next thing, I've ridden 91 winners in a season, and honestly, I was kind of oblivious to it. I just got on these horses that jumped for fun. They were the best horses in the race, and I just steered them round, and they won. And that's how it was. I think the longest period I went was like 14, 15 rides through the whole season without having a winner, and it. You know, that was 3 or 4 days. It was just point and go, and his horses were flying. And but I can't say that I really knew what I was doing. I was just this jockey in this whirlwind, and loved every second of it, and just steered these brilliant horses around. And
were you appreciating it at the time, or did you not really appreciate it at the time?
I think like you do, but then you have a couple like, so when I was perhaps mid-20s or. Then you realise what was going on then, and you kind of wish I had the chance again because you're a lot more streetwise and you know what's what more.
And you were so young as well, and when you get a job with that much pressure and those bigger owners started coming into the yard, that must have been quite tough.
Yeah, the first season it wasn't the case because it was all good. The second season was harder because the horses weren't in quite so good form, and then you get not fingers pointing, because that's wrong. But then, you know, Paul was growing as well at the same time, and he was attracting these big owners who wanted Adrian Maguire, say, or Paul Carberry, and people like that. That was who I was competing against. And once one goes, then a couple more go, and it was kind of the second season was a bit more of a wake-up call, and welcome to. We're no longer just having a jolly. This is a proper business.
But you did ride Paul Nicholls' first ever Cheltenham Festival winner.
Yeah, Flagship Brawlers, yeah.
Yeah, and what a horse he was. Went to 3 different trainers in the end and won a stack of Grade 1s for all of them. But when you were on him, he really was at his absolute pomp as a younger horse. Talk me through that day at Cheltenham when he won the Arkle.
Well, I can still remember going down to the first 3 in the Arkle, and it was the quickest I'd ever been. I've been riding in all the big races all season, but that was the quickest I'd been down to a fence. And you know, we went at a right gallop, but he was. Those good horses have the ability to be. I think he actually lost a gear as he got older, because when he won his Queen Mother, he was, you know, he outstayed them really. But when he won the Arkle, he had a gear, and you know, and he had lots of scope, so everything was spot on or longer, and he was just able to take you through a race. And you know, he got a bit tight to the second last, but other than that, it was straightforward. He was expected to win, and he did it in really good style.
And it was an interesting Cheltenham Festival for you, because although you had that winner, the Gold Cup was a different story, because you were on Double Thriller, who was the favourite, and yet the stable companion Seymour Business was the winner at 16-1. How did that feel? You definitely think about, I didn't really have the choice as such, because I'd done so well on Double Thriller leading up to it that he was sort of my ride, and Seymour Business wasn't having a great year until they sort of introduced the blinkers. But so it was obviously disappointing to miss out on a Gold Cup winner, but it wasn't really the option that, Joe, you make the decision which one you're going to ride, because it was kind of the way the Seymour had been running and the way Double Thriller, and I'd won big race on him. It was just that was the one I was always going to ride, you see. So just one that got away. It wasn't a Ruby Walsh, Corto Denman choice.
No, it wasn't anything like that. You know, it was Double Thriller was the horse I was going to ride for some time leading up to it, and you know, he ran really well, finishing 4th.
And it's amazing you gauge how successful and how influential somebody's been by how many people you talk to whose lives have intertwined with them. And you're probably the 10th person who sat in that chair who's had sort of a major involvement with Paul Nicholls. And everybody talks quite interestingly about him and what it was like in those days and this machine moving forwards. Just give me a flavour of the atmosphere at Ditchett in the sort of late 90s, early noughties.
It was incredible. I went there as a 16-year-old, and I just happened to knock on the kitchen door, and instead of going into like the staff room, so I got invited into the kitchen, and 3 days a week I would go and help put the haze around with Clifford Baker had just started literally a week before me, and so I was part of the kitchen, which was Clifford and Paul and Bridget and Ross Stark was the assistant at the time, so I was involved in all of it. I went racing with Paul all the time, and he was so enthusiastic and driven. It was unbelievable. I was part of that snowball. I remember Robert Ogden or Barry Simpson had phoned me up to ride one of his horses at Perth in an amateur race, and Paul flew up with me. He didn't have any runners, but he flew up with me because he knew that was going to get him a chance to meet Barry Simpson, and so he came up to Perth with me just to get that. So that's how it was, and you know, the horses were arriving that week at Cheltenham when he had his first festival win, and the 3 Cool Equiname as well, and Seymour. You know, he was absolutely popping then. That was you can imagine what he's like. He still is driven now, but he was loving it at that stage.
It must have been an incredibly high octane, intense atmosphere. Yeah,
it was full on. You know, I was still there when he was going for his first championship, and he got to the last week when he was up against Martin Pipe, and you know, there was a lot. He was sending horses here, there, and everywhere. And he wasn't quite capable of sealing it, and you know, then we went up to Bangor and ran a horse in a novice chase, and he fell, and Paul walked off on his own around the track. You know, he wanted it that much, and it wasn't quite happening. But it was intense. But I was part of it. Him and Bridget were like second family to me, nearly. You know, taking me on, teaching me about racing, taking me on trips everywhere, and it was just a great ride to go along with.
I bet it was. How much of the groundwork that you learnt there have you applied to the training now?
stack. So we used to, when we put our gallop in at home, which would have been sort of around 2000, we just copied what Paul was doing. You know, we started feeding Halish because he did. We started feeding Vixen horse feed because he did. He went 3 times up his hill, so lucky we've got a hill on the farm at home, and we put a hill gallop in, and we went 3 times up our gallop. It was that's how we did it. You know, we used to put the same non-slip pads on them as Paul did, because that's what he used, and so then we brought it in at home. So there was a lot that we sort of brought back, and I'd picked up and would say to Dad, and Dad had picked up because he was racing with us a lot as well, and just you knew if you were copying him, you were doing it right.
I know the easy answer is, oh, you just need results, but what's the secret, do you think, to acquiring and retaining the modern owner, which is what you seem to have got the knack of now?
Yeah, our point of view at home is, you know, they want results, but they also want a lot of fun. You know, they want a lot of interaction. You know, these boys are spending a lot of money. I say they're on their day out. So if we've got to make it a fun day out for them. You know, so the social side of it, it's got to be good fun, lots of interaction, and a bit of luck. If they know that you're working for them and you're on their side and you're honest with these people, then I think the results come and they stick with you.
And if you're talking about a real straight shooter who likes the unvarnished truth, nobody would fit that description more than the late Bob Bishop, for whom you trained Q Card and many other grey horses. How important for you personally was that horse?
For me, it was. It sort of gave me a second life as a jockey. You know, I was mid-20s. I'd had 2 Cheltenham Festival winners, but nothing for 10 years. And then along came Q Card, and I'd ridden for Bob for 2 or 3 years, but that was the first horse he bought and sent to us. And you know, right from day one, he was really sharp. And then after his win at Fontwell, we kind of jokingly told people that this 40-to-1 horse in the bumper, we think he's going to run a massive race. We didn't think he was going to do it like he did, but you know, that took me on again. You know, gave me my sort of second lease of life on horses, and I see it there now. Like he absolutely sluiced up, didn't he? But he gave us big days again. He gave us huge Saturdays, and gave me huge Saturdays, and that's what being a jockey's all about.
And I suppose when you are that little bit older, the depth of appreciation is greater.
Definitely, you know, especially like I was saying, those Paul Nicholls horses. I was kind of oblivious to what I was achieving, whereas I knew how I'd had a few years on the still riding plenty of winners, but I knew what that winner meant. I really did.
Were you in slight disbelief at this point?
Yeah,
quite how easily he'd done it.
And it was the last race on the Wednesday as well, and it was quite quiet. I remember walking up in here and it was quite quiet, and Dad, as much as anybody, I remember he always says like the hairs on the back of his neck stood up, and he couldn't quite believe what was going on. But this was a huge day for our yard and our family, and the start of where we are now.
No, Paul, you didn't train that one.
No, Paul and Dan, though.
Because Paul had trained the runner-up, didn't he?
Alfarov, yeah.
But that was a nice touch, him coming to congratulate you straight away.
Yeah, well, he's a good friend of mine. You know, like whatever we've been through jockey-wise, that was business. But he's a good friend of mine, and he meant that. He would have been proud of me.
Oh, it's a great moment, a really great moment, and a wonderful horse. And he bridged it really for you, didn't he? He bridged the transition from you riding him to victories in the Ryanair and so forth to, you know, his subsequent glorious renaissance with you as the trainer, essentially, or assistant trainer.
Yeah, he did. I mean, the fact that he kept coming back was unbelievable. But he you know, like even though he was still running when I decided to retire, I was hoping that he would come back. You know, because and then I remember Darryl was the first person to sort of get the ride on him, but he never got to ride the real Q Card. You know, just for whatever reason he wasn't quite right that year, so he never really got it. But Paddy obviously came in the next year, and he got it. And you know, I'd sat next to Paddy for all the years in the weighing room, and I was very proud that he got that feel off of Cue Card that I'd had off of him.
We had Paddy on the show just before Christmas, and he talked at length about the horse.
Yeah.
And he still hasn't forgiven himself for the fall in the Gold Cup. Will you allow him a bit of leeway?
Yeah, it's I'm not one that dwells on things. You know, it's you know, it's disappointing for everybody. Of course it was, and like he's the first person to hold his hands up and wish he'd done something wrong, and you feel that that's one that's got away. But there's no point dwelling on it. There's can't change it at the end of the day. You can be disappointed, but then you have to. It's happened, you know. You fell, and you have to pick yourself up and move on.
Do you think without that horse you would have had Native River and Lost in Translation and all these great Thistle Crack and all the great staying chases you've had subsequently?
Probably not. He was the one that really propelled us, but the whole yard was going in the right direction.
Yeah.
You know, we'd had Joe Lively beforehand, and you need one horse that's just going to really propel you to that next level. I mean, they don't come along very often. There's plenty of horses that will take you so far, but he was the one that took us again, and he became a real people's horse, and everybody knew who Colin Tizzard was, But the yard was going in the right direction. You just needed needed that one horse to take it on again.
And so, how is the responsibility divided now between you all?
Well, it's Dad is. Kim and I try and keep as much off of Dad as we can. You know, I do all of the entries, all of the declarations. Try to speak to as many people as possible. Kim runs the.
It's your sister, Kim.
Yes, yeah. People don't realise like the role she's got. She runs the day-to-day running the yard. So Dad and I can be sort of like the good guys, but if there's a bit of hay out of place, Kim is on their back.
So she's the actual boss.
She thinks she's his actual boss. No, we all three of us work well together, you know, and we have to, you know, probably when I first retired, there was a couple of probably 18 months where we were just sort of finding our feet of where we all stand.
How you all worked with each other.
Yeah,
it's difficult trying to work with family members in that.
Yeah, and
sense.
when I was a jockey, it was like come in, ride out, and shoot off racing and be gone. But when you're at home together all of the time, you need to just find the balance. And so it took sort of 18 months for that. But now we know what's what. Dad, Dad's never says no to anything, you know. So Kim and I can feed an idea. Let him think it's his idea 2 weeks later, and we get our own way. So it works really, really well. But you know, you say an easy Saturday, I could declare 17 horses in 4 different directions at 10 o'clock on a Friday morning, and Kim makes sure they all get there, and with the help of the head girl and the assistant and our travelling head lad. But she makes sure everything gets there. Mum does all of the colours. She makes sure they go there. Dad and I make sure they're all entered and everybody knows, and
soak up the glory.
Soak up the glory, yeah.
When, as they invariably do, they keep winning. Have you ever had a group as strong and as healthy as they are now?
No, definitely not. You know, we think back like a couple of years ago they were getting strong, but now our novice hurdlers, like, we've never had a bunch of novice hurdlers as strong as these coming through, and I think that's off the back of you know, buying these horses. That's as hard as anything, getting them in our yard in the first place, you know. And just through Ross Doyle bought Lost in Translation privately for Paul Taylor and Richard O'Dwyer, and then they introduced us to Ross, and then we started buying horses through him, and you know, that's kind of developed where we're buying horses as well. You know, like Tom Malone bought us our Gold Cup winners, and he still buys 1 or 2 for Brigade Racing places. But we try to do most things through Ross Doyle now, and that's he's working completely on our side. You know, but for jumpers he's buying for us, and he's been a big part of the last of these novice hurdlers coming up through anyway.
So you've got the relationship with the agent, you've got the feed work routine sorted out, you've done development at the yard, everything is working in sync. When does your name become the one on the licence?
We were only talking about that a couple of days ago, Dad and I, in the office. There's no rush. You know, there's no... They're talking about you can have these 2 names now, but there's 3 of us, so we can't have Joe and Colin because Kim will probably leave, and we can't deal without her. But it doesn't need to. You know, everybody knows who's there, and one day it'll come and it will change. But at the moment, it doesn't need to. Dad's not about to give it up.
So if there was a joint licence, and you were allowed to have joint licences, which, as I know, is slowly getting there, and your dad wanted to stand half to one side, well, I can't really see him standing to one side, to be honest. Could it be Joe and Kim?
I think it would just be Tizzard. Kim's not a Tizzard anymore, but she still calls herself Tizzard when she's talking to people who she wants to know who she is. But I work well with Kim now, you know, and she is a big part of the setup, and I'm not sat here trying to kill Dad off and say, right, that's your job lot, Kim, off you go, because we know what we do. So, you know, Dad often says we just call it Tizzard racing. And
are you as a person more fulfilled now in the training role than you were as a jockey?
Yeah, I am. You know, I love what we're doing now. You know, we sold the cows 18 months ago as well because, you know, it was a big decision. That was how we started as dairy farmers, and that was a big decision and a big push for what we want to do with the yard. And you know, I think it's already showing that that we're much stronger with me being able to have more time with the horses. But you know, I love this side of it. I enjoy watching horses on the gallop. I enjoy going racing. I enjoy all of it. You know, I enjoy dealing with the owners. There's a lot of disappointment, but there's a hell of a lot of reward, and the reward at the moment is completely outshining the disappointment.
And do you feel fortunate now, in retrospect, that you had a couple of bumps in the road early on in your own career, in your own life, and that makes you more appreciative of what you got now?
It makes you more appreciative, but I'm more in control of sort of like my destiny as it was now. Yeah. You know, the harder I work, the more success we're going to have. You know, and I don't want days off. You know, I don't want to not be in the yard. I live for it now and love every second of it.
And it so clearly comes out, and it's being manifested in the results that you're enjoying. We will talk so much more during the course of the program, but for the moment, Joe Tizard, thank you very much indeed.
Cheers, Nick.
Joe Tizard, part of one of the most